This Saturday episode of New Politics was released on the 8th of August, 2026, and produced on the lands of the Wongal and Gadigal people.
Who is the real Anthony Albanese? Has power changed his principles or just revealed what they really are? This is Labor's most powerful Prime Minister ever, but he's not prepared to use that power for the change that we've all been waiting for. I'm Eddie Djokovic.
I'm David Lewis. All of this is coming up in this big episode of New Politics.
And if you're listening in and haven't subscribed to our website at New Politics, you're missing out on half of what we do. There's regular articles and analysis of this strange world of politics. It's all free, and you can subscribe at newpolitics.com.au. And of course, if you do want to support us, it's just $5 per month at Patreon and Substack, and all of this is a good way to support independent journalism.
I rang the Prime Minister this morning and had a lengthy conversation with her. I informed the Prime Minister that I would be voting for Kevin Rudd in Monday's ballot. I have devoted my life to advancing the cause of Labor. I have despaired in recent days as I have watched Labor's legacy in government be devalued. I like fighting Tories. That's what I do. That's what I do.
And that was Anthony Albanese speaking in 2012 during a leadership challenge against the Prime Minister at the time, Julia Gillard. And this is a question that we've been asked a lot recently, and mainly since the completion of Labor's national conference just a few weeks ago. But the question is, who is the real Anthony Albanese? Because a lot of progressive people are quite confused about this and who Anthony Albanese actually is. Now, this is the man who once met Yasser Arafat in 1998, also visited Palestinian refugee camps and openly supported the Palestinian cause. But as Prime Minister, he's now shutting down debate within his own party and allowing pro-Israel interests to define educational curriculum and control the national debate about the issues in the Middle East, West Asia region. And it's pretty much the same process across almost every major issue, David. There's AUKUS now trying to co-opt universities to do military research, which will support the United States and Israel, selling weapon parts to Israel and then trying to say that it wasn't happening when it actually was. I think we discussed that issue last year. We had all the evidence. There's now this push for all these new AI data centres without any discussion at all. Lack of progress on gambling advertising reform. There's more mines that are being opened. There's also the failure to tax Australia's gas exports properly, even though there's a massive public support for all of this. So we just see time and time and again that Albanese facilitates the concentration of power instead of standing up to it. And his idea of social cohesion is elevating the concerns of one specific community while marginalising all the others. There's tightly controlled debates, and then he suggests that unity has been achieved. And this is the same across so many different issues. And this is all the opposite of the politician Albanese once claimed to be. So the question has to be, has he abandoned all of his principles that he once had, now that he's got the power of the Prime Ministership, or was the progressive Albanese from the past always just a carefully constructed facade?
I think we've got to acknowledge that the firebrand of 1996 almost inevitably has to mellow. You get older, your views change a little bit, your mind changes, life experience gets in the way, and some of your more radical ideas become less tenable based on your experience and education and temperament. So people expecting that middle-aged Anthony Albanese would be the same person as 25-year-old Anthony Albanese are going to be disappointed. The other thing too is that it's easy to say things when you're not Prime Minister. It's harder to say them when you are Prime Minister. There are all kinds of other influences, international treaties, tensions between countries that you're trying to lower rather than raise, stakeholders of all kinds who have valid points that decisions that aren't allowed to be announced yet, because announcing them too early might wreck their chances of successful implementation. There's all of this, and we acknowledge that. And it has to be considered whenever we look at what has the Prime Minister done and what hasn't the Prime Minister done. It's not an easy job, and sometimes you've got to make decisions that go against your grain, but they're the right decision for the parliament at least, or the party. Having said that, people were expecting a more reformist, maybe not radical, but a more reformist government. People were hoping for a bit more of that elbow fire when it came to things. It's all very well to be moderate and conciliatory, and a good leader knows when to be that. But sometimes you've got to jump up and say, this is the right thing to do. Not just on the minor peripheral issues, which he's done, let's be fair, but on the major issues. No, this is what we were supposed to do. But in fact, the right thing to do is this, according to my conscience and my beliefs. And that's what people are perceiving he hasn't done. And perception is everything in politics.
Oh, for sure. But I think that it's just that whenever there's any sort of reform that's discussed that might threaten corporate profits or vested interests, well, the Albanese government suddenly suggests that any sort of reform of this nature is dangerous, or it's too disruptive, or it's too populist. And quite often Albanese and these vested interests, they use the same language. It's almost as though he's been handed out this script to tell him exactly what to say. And there was a suggestion several years ago about putting a cap on supermarket prices, and Free Market Albanese said that this was all communism and we don't do this sort of thing in Australia. That's just one example, but did nothing on gas export taxes. And what he actually did do was extend the protection for existing contracts and make sure that they were exempt from any additional taxes in the future. And with gambling advertising reform, same sort of thing, that's all been avoided. That's in Parliament at the moment, but David Pocock wanted stronger protections, and now Labor is threatening to withdraw its legislation completely. And so it's just a lot of lip service to all of these issues. You make the claim that something's going to be done about something, draft up some flimsy legislation, and then have it stalled or withdrawn from Parliament. And these are Albanese's winners, the gas exporters, the gambling companies, the NRL, and Go Rabbitohs and all that sort of stuff, and the sports clubs, big media corporations. These are all the winners, and the losers just tend to be the public, and that idea of Labor values just being tossed out the window. Maybe that's why our listeners keep coming back to us and saying, look, we're really disappointed in Albanese because he's done this or whatever. Whenever there's a big issue that comes up, it's the same response, that they're disappointed. Yeah. This is not what I voted for and all that sort of stuff.
Yeah, the rugby league shouldn't need any government handout. It seems to do really well with the merchandising, with the ticket sales, with the TV rights. I don't know why it needs government handouts. I don't blame it for taking it. Free money's free money. But the gambling industry certainly doesn't need it. And in fact, we need more controls. I don't think the right thing is to ban gambling. That just drives it underground. You may as well get the tax advantages. You may as well get it so people have access for when it gets out of hand. And you try and catch them before they're in the stage where they've lost their house and they've lost their job because they've spent everything and then had to have taken money from their employer or whomever. Nobody wants that. Nobody wants that. That's where the money into gambling should go, back into the tab, away from the micro betting online stuff. And you do that by stopping the advertising. Stop having makers come in and discuss why they've set the odds for each team. Stop having the micro betting online. I don't quite know how you ban it, because VPN systems mean people can go to overseas sites, which are worse. But we can at least stop the normalization of it, that if you're watching a sport, if you're watching football or netball or what have you, you're watching it for the enjoyment of the game. You're not watching it because you've got some kind of financial stake in it. Poker machines, the scourge of the Sydney entertainment scene.
Well, 10% of the world's gambling machines are in New South Wales.
Yeah, and the biggest one in Sydney is in Campsie, just up the road. It does $500 million a year or something.
Well, I'll see you down there.
Yeah, that's right.
But the point is that it's not about eliminating this completely, although personally I feel that would be a good thing to do. But you'll never eliminate it, but it's about reducing the harm. It's about
Yeah,
reducing the
exactly.
opportunity to do all of this. So if you have all of these practices in place or all of this legislation in place, and sure, all people have to get a VPN to access these micro-odd systems and stuff like that. That's another step that they have to go to. So you're going to eliminate quite a few people that think, what's a VPN anyway? How do I get it? Oh, no, I can't be bothered. So it just seems like there needs to be a lot of steps that are put in place. And that's the main issue that I'd be wanting to push.
Yeah, you shouldn't ban it because it just goes underground. And we go back to Sydney 1950 with Abe Saffron and Perscalia and the underground casinos and stuff. The Ladbrokes. So all that money is flying back to Britain. Is that a good thing? I'm not sure it is. And again, this is not to judge those of you listening who don't mind the odd flutter. As I said, I've got nothing against people spending money that they can afford on things that they enjoy, that are legal and that aren't, that don't hurt other people. But this is only one thing. I haven't got onto the gas yet.
Oh, there's a whole lot of issues going on. But there was also the AI data centre issue, which just came out of nowhere last week. But that's a range of AI data centres that were all announced without looking at the consequences for energy, water, housing, how many jobs are going to be lost through AI. Didn't go through all the copyright issues, although they are talking about some protection there for authors and copyright owners. So the environmental issues, didn't talk about that. There's also the question about who all of this is going to support. And you mentioned Ladbrokes before in the gambling sector, but in this sort of situation, this AI data centre issue is probably going to support the Amazons and the Metas of this world, or maybe more spy software for Palantir or Elon Musk. But this was a really big announcement, but there were just no protections outlined. So we could have a case where Australia provides all the land, all the electricity, a lot of public subsidies as well, and all of these multinational corporations will control the technology, they'll control all of the data, and they will control all of the profits. And we've seen this story before, David, and Australia just does not have a good track record with this sort of stuff. And we'll just have a look at the gas export system. But instead of selling off all of our resources for a song and then buying it back, which is what we do from Korea and Japan, selling off our gas and then buying it back, inflated prices. This is probably going to happen here again, but in the digital field as well. We're probably going to do all of that same story that we did with the gas exports, probably do all of that with our data as well and not get anything in return for it. We'll never learn from our historical mistakes.
No. Certainly Australia could become a world leader in AI and the ethical and proper use of AI. But no, we'll just build ugly buildings in the middle of nowhere that will suck resources and shovel the money overseas. Because that seems to be the easy solution, not the good solution. And again, this is where a strong Labor Prime Minister would start to think, hold on, how can I make this better for the whole country? Not just a very few people who will benefit, but everyone.
And that's what the imperative should be, David. How do I assess this policy, introduce this policy, introduce AI data centres that are in the public interest and benefit the entire community, not just Amazon and Facebook?
Yeah, and it may be that the answer is that you can't, that there's just no benefit to this type of stuff. And if that's the case, then we don't do it.
I think we just have to look at the history of how all of this stuff is done. It's always in the interest to foreign companies, overseas interests, and we sell all this stuff. We've done it with physical stuff. We get nothing in return. It's now going to happen with digital information and data.
And we put all our resources into selling the stuff instead of building our own industries. We had a thriving car industry. We had a thriving rail building industry. We've built some of the most amazing things in the world. The Sydney Harbour Bridge was an engineering miracle. Instead, Australia seems to take the easy route every single time, and every single time it costs.
This is New Politics, independent analysis of Australian and international politics. For more free articles and analysis, join us at newpolitics.com.au.
One other issue that has arisen is that there is this commentary that Anthony Albanese is in this position where he's possibly the most powerful person the Labor Party has ever had. as far as the control of the Labor Party is concerned, not so much as far as pushing a Labor Party agenda through to government. And we've always said this, David, that Anthony Albanese seems to be a weak Prime Minister. He's in a very powerful position but refuses to do very much with that power. And the other point is that this authority that he's got over the Labor Party on silencing dissent within the party, this is starting to breed some resentment behind the scenes. And Labor MP Ed Husich, he was surprised by the efforts that have gone into suppressing different perspectives on Palestine within the Labor Party. Here he is speaking during the week.
I was personally horrified by the report in late June that was issued by the UN investigators that talked about 20,000 kids have been killed and 44,000 injured in Gaza as a result of the actions of the Netanyahu government. That should send a chill through the spines of so many people. We need to stand up. We need to work with other like-minded countries. This is an issue that is worth standing up on. I have been surprised at the extraordinary amount of energy that has been applied to stop this as opposed to talking about this.
And my feeling is that Labor under Anthony Albanese, it just seems to be governing as though it's got this one-seat majority or it's in minority government rather than governing as though it's got a majority of 38 seats, which is what it's actually got. And this week, the government was going to announce a tough immigration policy, and it was also going to reduce the yearly intake of migrants. And it's virtually a rip-off of One Nation policy. And to me, it just supports what I said about Albanese being a weak Prime Minister in a strong position and not using it. Now, the Labor Party has got 94 seats out of 150 lower house seats, and that's the biggest majority that's ever been held in Federation. And it's chasing the agenda and worried about a fringe minor party that just holds the 2 seats in the lower house. And I know that there's all the opinion polling that's going on at the moment, but that's opinion polls. You've got to base your strategy on the seats that exist in Parliament. So Labor is more worried about appeasing One Nation than it is about listening to its own membership. And to me, it's just really embarrassing that it's got to this point. You've got this massive majority and you're worried about what this tin pot 2-seat party is getting up to.
Could you imagine what a Keating or a Whitlam would have done with a 38-seat majority and a soft Senate, let alone a Curtin or a Chifley, or Chifley got a lot done? Or even a Rudd would have done with a softer or an easier Senate. Rudd would have quite possibly brought in his mining tax. Keating quite possibly would have brought in better protections for first home buyers or brought in more arts. I'm thinking of the positive things, not so much of his economic policies that Howard was able to run with.
Yeah, and it's not a case of that 38-seat majority is any different to a 10-seat majority practically. You're still governing with the same authority. But the point is that if you've got this sort of majority, that means that you're pretty much guaranteed another term in Parliament. Things are never guaranteed, but that's the thing. You're pretty much guaranteed of a long term in office. So why are you not using this facility?
Yeah, and why aren't you trying to protect your majority rather than lose 6 or 8 seats next time, most likely?
And that has to be the price of implementing reforms if you are going to do it properly. That's the nature of politics. You've got to use up your political capital.
Yeah, exactly. It should be the price of doing stuff rather than the cost of not doing stuff. And he's looking at the moment disaffection from his own side. Now, he's a very smart operator. He absolutely knows that there are some votes he's never going to win. And looking at some of the really, let's be fair, unfair things that are said about him on the right, I can see why he's not interested in winning over a lot of the right or even trying to. They're never going to believe him. John Howard was the same. John Howard knew he wasn't going to get anyone from the left. He knew his extra votes were in the centre. And this is possibly what Anthony Albanese is thinking. I don't need to win any on the left. They're going to vote for me anyway, even if they have to hold their nose to do it. And those preferences will flow through to me. So I don't need to appease the left. There's an element of the right who are never going to vote for me, no matter what I do. I could cut their tax to 0 and they'd call it irresponsible. I could raise their tax to 90% and they'd call it irresponsible.
Well, sometimes you can just never win.
Yeah, and that's what I'm saying. I don't mind that Anthony Albanese isn't trying to win over those who he'll never try to win over. John Howard knew that. You aimed at the people who might vote for you. The trouble is, John Howard had a very different set of expectations from the electorate. The electorate has said twice now it wants a reforming government.
Well, sometimes politicians and prime ministers just don't listen. But for me, it just gets back to that original question that we started off with. Who is Anthony Albanese? And it's not like the real Julia issue that appeared for Julia Gillard back in 2010, but it's along those lines. And the younger Albanese, and we're not talking about when he was a little kid or anything like that, but as a politician earlier in his career, as I mentioned, he visited Palestinian refugee camps. He condemned Labor leaders for courting millionaires. Had a go at Bob Hawke at the time. He questioned the alliance with the United States. And 30 years later, he still talks about his public housing childhood while practising that caution that he was once highly opposed to. And of course, you talked about this before, David. People do change. You become more refined in your ideas, but your fundamental values generally remain the same. But to see a 180-degree turnaround, for me, it's just a travesty. But we've seen this story before. There are the limitations of power once you actually get there. We understand that and we accept that. But it's Albanese. He's the one who's actually placing all of these limitations of the power. And it sort of happened to Malcolm Turnbull before him, roared like a lion when he didn't have any power, but then weak as a mouse when he did become Prime Minister. But to me, this is a different situation. The Liberal Party controlled Malcolm Turnbull at that time when he was Prime Minister in 2016. So that's all understandable. But Albanese has got almost complete control of the Labor Party. So the only restrictions in this sort of situation are coming from him. And I can remember a lot of Albanese supporters was, during that first term when we were saying, oh, look, too cautious, mate, get on with it. They were all saying, look, just wait until his second term. Yeah, just wait for the second term. You'll see the real Albanese and things will happen. But David, we're in the second term. We're almost halfway through it. Still waiting for a bit of action. But if we're waiting for Albanese, it's almost like waiting for Godot. It's just never going to happen. And I'd say that what we are seeing, to all of those listeners out there who are asking, when are we going to see the real Albanese? What we are seeing at the moment is the real Anthony Albanese, and not much is going to change.
As you get older, it's less likely that you'll change. It's not impossible. But I think we can now see a cautious, safe pair of hands. Not quite timid. I think timid is over-egging it a bit, but cautious, safe pair of hands. Not much will happen. Not much will change. There'll be no major scandals. There'll be no major incompetencies. Let's look at the bright side of this stuff. We don't have the lurching chaos of a Morrison government, or the destabilised anarchy of Turnbull, or the banana cake boo-boo nuttiness of the Abbott era. We have something different, and there are advantages to that. Let's be fair. After the chaos we had from Rudd, Gillard, Rudd, Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison, having the safe pair of hands isn't completely insane and completely irresponsible. Having said that, after Rudd, Gillard, Rudd, Abbott, Turnbull, Morrison, people want to see substantial, lasting and radical change, even if that era of chaos never happens again.
That's it for this episode of New Politics. Thanks for listening in. And if you value independent journalism without the influence of corporate backing, join New Politics at newpolitics.com.au and support us directly. It's just $5 per month, and we always try to keep it very simple. If you like what we do, please send some support our way. It keeps our commitment to independent journalism ticking along. I'm Eddie Djokovic. Thanks for listening in, and it's goodbye to our listeners.
I'm David Lewis. We'll see you next time.